Good day, learners. This is Sir Arvin, and I will be discussing to you on how to create review of related literature systematically. But first, let's define what is the objectives of this particular lesson. It aims to present written review of related literature. And now let's define what is RRL. Okay, it is actually an area that a researcher examines concepts related to their research. It can be found on books, journals, studies, and other reading materials in the past. A literature review defines a specific issue, concept, theory, phenomena, and compiles published literature on a topic. It also summarizes critical points of current knowledge about the problem and suggests next steps in addressing it. Now let's differentiate the two categories of RRL. We have traditional, that in which this is the traditional RRL that we are using, and now we are going to utilize the systematic way on how to create RRL. But now let's differentiate those two. In traditional, as you all know, it is a summary of research connected to one's topic of study and contains synthesis, which summarizes what the points of those research papers or ideas all about, of what has been conducted in research area, again by whom, highlights what past studies tell about the topic, and also it determines the research gap or the gaps or the limitations of other researches and that you wanted to work on. While the systematic process or systematic way of creating RL, it follows a certain process, or it is a methodological process that a body of literature is grouped into table, reviewed, and assessed while utilizing pre-specified and standardized techniques. Okay, it follows a certain protocol in which it explains, it helps the researcher to further analyze the body of literature that they wanted to include in their research paper. Again, systematic follows a certain process. As we all know, that quantitative research is systematic, objective way of gathering data. And we wanted also to do that in our RRL, in which we are going to use the systematic review of related literature, in which again, it follows certain process and involves sequential acts of reviewing related literature. What do we need first, in determining what to include in the systematic RRL? First, we have to include rational, research problem, and methods of data collection. To reduce bias, the rationale and the problem and the methods of data collection are prepared before the review and are used as a guide for performing the process. Just like it is for the traditional literature reviews, the goal is to identify, critically appraise, and summarize the existing evidence concerning a clearly defined problem. So at first, we need to define those three in order for us to create a systematic RRL. Now let's define the 6 steps of systematic review of related literature. The first step is for us to define the objective or framing questions for review. Those objectives and those questions are actually placed in the research article located in title, abstract, and introduction. Okay, so the problem or objective must be addressed clearly before beginning the review work. The problems to be addressed by the review should be specified in a form of clear, unambiguous, and structured questions before beginning the review work. Once the review questions have been set, modifications to the protocol should be allowed only if alternative ways of defining the populations, interventions, outcomes, or study designs becomes apparent. Example of the objective. The objective of this literature revision is to systematically review and analyze the current research on the effects of music on the anxiety levels of children in the hospital settings. As you can see, the objective in this particular paragraph is located in the last part of the sentence, in which it wanted to analyze the current research on the effects of music on the anxiety levels of children in hospital settings. And an example of a structured research question, which is located in, most probably, in your general question or general statement. The example is, what are the most important factors associated with the development of PTSD in soldiers? Now, let's proceed with the second step, in which we should clearly specify the methodology of the review and define eligibility criteria. Criteria must meet by the published material in order to be included or excluded from the study, and reasons for inclusion and exclusion should be recorded. Meaning to say, we have to place what we need to include in our research study and what also we need to exclude or not to be included in your research conduction. Okay, why is it important? It's important because we will be able to limit what we are going to present, and we are also able to explain what are the inclusions or what we should include in the research paper. Example of inclusion criteria. Publication was an academic and peer-reviewed study. Publication was a study that examined the effects of a regular physical exercise intervention on depression and included a control group. In this particular example, it includes those people who might think that physical exercise can help them with avoiding intervention, and it also includes a experimental control group. So that's the inclusion criteria of the particular study. While the exclusion criteria example is that publication was involving male adults, studies that also examined non-physical activities as interventions, studied that were only published in a language other than English. So those are the exclusion criteria, in which it only involves male adults, and it also examined non-physical activities, and English is the only language that is being used in this particular study. Now let's proceed with the third step. Okay, we have to retrieve eligible literature. You have to search for studies that should be extensive and thoroughly report your research strategy throughout the process. Okay, we have to search for literature reviews or literature coming from articles such as scholarly journals and other books that is being used by most of the researchers across the world. Okay, we can search for electronic databases such as EBSCOs and PsycInfo. Okay, in which, in this particular example, it is chosen because of the psychological focus that encompasses psychosocial effects of emotional abuse in childhood. Okay, so in which, according to this particular example, the EBSCO host produce 200 results from the search criteria, while PsycInfo produced 467 for a total of 667 articles. Okay? Articles were also rejected if it was determined from the title and the abstract that the study failed to meet the inclusion criteria. Okay? If it fails to meet the inclusion criteria, therefore those titles were not going to be included in your literature review. Any ambiguities regarding the application of the selection criteria will resolve through discussions between all the researchers. So it is important that all the researchers will collaborate in doing systematic RRL because you are going to analyze which of the following articles that you can use in your literature review. So that's how systematic RRL works. Not only just placing the articles just because you think it is fitted to your research paper, but not anymore. So you have to check for the inclusion and exclusion criteria before you come up with choosing it as part of your research paper under literature review. So yeah. Now let's proceed with the fourth step. Okay, we have to assess the quality of studies. Okay, we have to check the alignment, the validity, and reliability of the instruments they use. Okay, we're not just including them because it is somehow related with our study, but it doesn't have really methodological quality, or it has low methodological quality. So we have to exclude that. Okay, so example of the instruments available for evaluating the quality of the studies are PEDRO, Jadad Scale, Delis of Delphi, OT Circular, and Maastricht criteria. Okay, so here we have to present the excluded articles as part of the selection process mentioned in step 3. Okay, so again, in step 4, we include the articles with low methodological quality. So you have to check the data collection process, the statistical measurements that it is being used, and the scale questions that is being used in that particular research. You have to check it. It has a quality, and if it helps your paper to conduct a particular study about that related literature. Now, with the 5th step, okay, we have to summarize the evidences in which it determines the data to look for in all collected studies and summarize it. Okay, this is also called thematic arrangement of the gathered literature. Okay, in which it proceed with the so-called characterization of the studies, decide which data to look for in all the selected studies, and present it in a summarized way. If the information is missing in some specific paper, always registered it in your report. Okay? So examples of the information that should and could be collected for the characterization of the literature might include the authors, year, sample size, study design, aims, objectives, findings, results, and limitations of a particular research study. Now, the structure of this particular systematic RL is chronological and thematic. Again, thematic arrangement in which the topics the topics related to your title must be placed in the systematic RRL. When we say chronological, it is to express the development of the concept and usually applied in an experimental study. But most probably, we're going to use thematic structure. And summarizing the evidences, we have to use cohesive devices to achieve clear logical flow of discussion of relevant literature. So you can take a screenshot of this particular table, because as you summarize all collected and reviewed literature review, provide a good organization of your RRL through the use of this some cohesive devices. So you can use cohesive devices when you want to add, to show similarity, to show comparison, to show sequence, to give examples, to conclude, and to emphasize. Okay? Lastly is to interpret the findings. Okay? So to synthesize the results from different studies and interpret them. Okay? In which here you write a synthesis of the study, integrate the results, the studies found in various literatures, and integrate the results of different studies and interpret them in a narrative form. Okay? Patterns discovered as result should be summarized in a qualitative narrative form. Modulate one or more general arguments for organizing the review. Some trick to help you do this is to choose 2 or 3 main information sources, such as in articles, books, or other literature reviews, to explain the result of other studies through a similar way of organization. So you have to connect the information reported by different sources and do not just summarize the results. Find patterns in results of different studies, identify them, address the theoretical and methodological conflicts, and try to interpret them. Summarize the principal conclusions and evaluate the current state on the subject by pointing out possible further direction. The questions must be answered in this particular synthesis is that first is, what do they tell about the topic? Are there gaps in the research? Are there contradictions in one's findings? How do these findings inform a response to one's research question? What recommendations can a research offer? Or is there a need for further research? Okay. Now let's again define the research gap. No? It is the limited knowledge issue problem appeared as a researcher reviews related literature. So this is the step 6. No? Now let's examine. Okay, so systematic RRL is used to find out connection of the research to current situation and previous study, and to understand more the ideas underlying in one's study, and to obtain information on the accuracy and relevance of one's research questions. Do you have any question? If you have, you can communicate with your respective research teacher so that they can address and help you with creating a systematic RRL. But you have to check the performance tasks provided with you in creating systematic RRL so that you can see what you can do and what you can create in doing such. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, just please restudy what systematic RRL is all about. To end this, here are the references. If you don't have any questions, again, thank you very much, and we'll see you in our synchronous classes. Bye for now.